Every year, over 1 million youth football injuries are reported in the U.S. alone. Football produces more cervical spine injuries than any other sport. Brian Williams has been involved in security for much of his life, firefighter, bouncer, and many other things, but most importantly, a man that is passionate about making sure our young kids and athletes are safe when they step on to the field. Brian, thanks for taking a few minutes to drop by the SwagAbility Show. I appreciate you hanging out with us for a bit.
No, thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it, Stephen.
Before the invention, before the major thing of what we're here to talk about, where the interest come for protecting this mindset about protecting people, whether it be in security, whether it be as your job's a firefighter, where did that burning desire to protect humanity come from for you?
It's kind of strange until I started this. I had thought that, well, what are you going to do today? Friends of mine and family, Brian, what are you doing now? I was doing security and I was scuba diving and then, doing all kinds of crazy stuff. But career wise, since I was a teenager working in construction, um, I always took safety seriously, not just for myself, but for everyone. And I became the guy that would kind of like force the safety. And this is before even OSHA, like some of the smaller companies, they were pushing the issue. So I became the mouthpiece, sometimes the unpopular one when it came to management, because they wouldn't follow safety protocols. And
What
it
was your
wasn't just
first job? What was your first job where safety would have been something that you started to take seriously?
construction. I worked as a glazier and then, storefronts in Manhattan and, in the Bronx. And, it was a dangerous job because of, what we were dealing with. And I got cut and hurt plenty of times, but that was the issue. I also did scaffolding work, which was an
Mhm.
early, they weren't following any of the protocols. No one was tied in. Nobody had a safety harness. No one wanted to speak up because they didn't want to jeopardize their job. And I can't tell you that, I lost money over this, but I couldn't keep quiet about this. The management and the owners would be making money and at the expense of young guys getting hurt. I was working in high school, so 1978, 79, when
Yeah,
I first started working as a
yeah.
teenager, and through the 80s.
It's amazing how, I find how time, when you look back at it, like we're talking earlier, anything like concussions in hockey weren't talked about, or being punch drunk in a sport was just whatever. But over time, we've come to realize things. So I was just curious as to when your heightened sense of, wait a minute, stuff isn't going right on the job site, but that came with you right from the 70s on.
Oh yeah, I was always making noise about that. Like back
Yeah.
in the early 80s, I used to work with glass, and mirrors were big back then, and to polish them, you did it by hand with a belt sander, and by the code, you're supposed to either use wax on it or basically wear a mask because it's glass dust. And these old guys would be like, what's the matter? You coward. Just what do you got that mask on for? And the young guys look at me. I said, don't listen to him. He's an idiot. His lungs are going to be filled with that, 10 years from now, he's going to be dying of cancer.
Yeah.
So that was the thing. They would, listen to these guys and, be shamed into not following the safety by being called a coward. I'm like, no, it's not that. You're an idiot.
Yeah.
Follow the safety, and we all go home at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And it just right through. As I said, I started with security in '85, working nightclubs, and
Yeah.
I didn't really like that too much because, again, I didn't want to hit anyone, and I didn't want to get hit.
That's
You know,
so opposite of what you hear in the bouncers.
Oh, yeah,
All
yeah,
of them
and
are looking
it's
for fight.
and they're not all like that, but some of them were, including
Yeah,
where I worked. They would high five each other after a big fight. And I'm like, no, I'm not. No,
yeah,
that's not what I'm about. I'm about
yeah,
that we all do a job, and at the end of the day, we all go home, safe. And that carried right through to the fire department and security and everything else
yeah.
that I've done.
On the fire department, you know, what role, did you play? And were you on the fire department in New York
Yeah,
or
in New York City. I started in
wow,
Manhattan.
wow,
and then
You've
finished
seen
up
some
my
stuff.
career in the Bronx. Yeah, so I was there for 9/11 and, a lot of the big, events that went on. But again, it was, after a while they have what they call a senior guy, and and if you're one of the senior guys in the house, meaning the guys that have been there the longest, you take the younger guys under your wing and you make sure they're trained and, and they're up for doing the job, because when you go out, the officer, a lot of times he takes off with one of the junior guys, and, so everyone's looking at you, especially after 9/11, when a lot of the guys retired. It was a flood of these junior guys, and, I remember when I first got hired, the guys in the back, you couldn't have 2 guys working together if they had under 5 years, because it was considered dangerous. Well, after 9/11, I was a chauffeur, I turned around, all 4 guys on the back had under 5 years combined. The city just flooded the job because, all these guys retired.
What were some over the years more serious or horrific? You would have seen accidents, of course, fire, whatever, but what were some of the ones that stand out in your mind that were not things you were running towards to help people out, but were a result of either equipment or policies not being in place that you remember over your career going, that could have been avoided. That really could have been avoided.
Yeah.
No worries.
I mean,
Yeah.
job-wise,
Sure.
you know, the fire department had protocols in place and training, and every time there was an incident, you try to look at what went wrong,
Yeah.
and not for, well, it's not supposed to be for blaming purposes. You don't want to be
Yeah.
blaming one guy or group of guys, but something went wrong, and they do an investigation and they come back and, well, what happened? And a lot of times it's not one thing that went wrong. It's a dozen things that went wrong all at once. And that's when guys die. Not so much to blame, but at some point in there, someone didn't follow protocol. Someone did
True.
something they weren't supposed to.
I often wonder too, like you guys, I mean, in Canada, it's cold, but you're on the East Coast, so you get the cold. I often think about you guys throwing water on stuff like that, and
Oh
that
yeah.
like, I'm thinking there's mist in the air, whatever. Even something as simple as like you got these rubber boots and things like that. I'm often wondering why they're not more slips and falls because of stuff icing up. I mean, these are just stuff that comes to my mind when
Well, you
thinking about
can,
my son-in-law.
yeah,
Yeah,
you can look it up and they'll, on jobs that were in the middle of January, February, and guys had icicles hanging off their helmets.
yeah,
But as far as the boots, and this was a hot topic that they changed the boots in 94, 95. They don't wear the rubber boots anymore. They wear
oh,
these leather boots. And there's pros and cons to them. And one of them is, I think we talked about, that's something else that I was working on, is that guy said the big leather boots, when the portable ladders got wet, their feet was sliding off of them, even though there's grooves in it. Again, it was the pros and cons, and they
yeah.
weighed both and decided that this was the better one. So that's what they wear now.
My father-in-law is a health safety guy, yeah, in here in Canada, goes to various job sites, and, I'm thinking about what you're saying, not a number it's not one thing that goes wrong, and he investigates deaths, but
Right.
he's often on the proactive side of things because uh, he can get to say to the guy that's giving him a hard time about, not having restraint or whatever, and he says, "You weren't with me this morning when, so and so was laying dead or whatever." So it's just, I think that'll carry over into our conversation. It's just either people thinking it won't happen or there's too much of an expense involved to, switch to this. I don't know what the mentality is, but, I gotta ask you because 'cause we're talking health and safety at work. Where did this passion come, from that made you realize that there was something wrong inside of youth sports, and particularly football with these neck and cervical, injuries and concussions,
So that
away
came
from the
up about,
workforce?
let's see, 2018. I had seen that movie Concussion. and this is what started me down that road. So, at the time, I was already doodling with, an idea for a new type of safety ladder because a friend of mine had fell off one and became paralyzed. And we talked about this about
Yeah,
initially he was paralyzed from the neck down and, then got, feeling back. And as I said, you talk to the doctors, they just don't know. Sometimes you get some of it back,
yeah,
sometimes you don't. And,
yep,
well, so but he's still now in the wheelchair. And, we said that, the ladders, again, they've been around for a long time and they do their job, but I always, some of us talked about, there should have been some type of, not going to say better, just different type of setup where you can't fall or tied in. And, the argument being, well, if I tether myself to this, I can't move fast enough that I have to untether. It takes too long. I have to get up and do my job. And I get it. And the same with now, with football, with the collar, a friend of mine said, and it's said, and it's to me, it's unacceptable, Brian. The numbers don't justify the cost
okay.
of making it better, even if they know there's something better out there.
So they're putting a
S-
price on a human life.
Yeah, yeah. So what's the number that they're gonna, 1, 2, 5, 10, 20,
Yeah,
30,
what's
uh,
too many?
yeah, I think that's unacceptable.
Yeah. And so you've seen the movie Concussion or whatever. Do you come from a background of with a creative mind? Things you like to build things you
Yeah,
like
yeah.
design? Yeah,
My mother used to say, and then her sisters, whenever she went away, my aunts would, I'd drive them crazy because I would have to take everything apart to figure out how it worked.
yeah,
And so I started messing around with computers and building them. I couldn't tell you how to run software, write code, but I know how to put them together, mechanically.
yeah,
So that I always messed around with, yeah, building stuff. And the nice thing about the firehouse is, I can't speak for today, been about quite a while, but when I got on, everyone had a trade. So my brother was a contractor, a builder. Was a master carpenter, so I learned carpentry from him. Got to the firehouse, there were plumbers, masons, welders, electricians. I learned everything from these guys,
yeah.
so we all traded each other, and we would help each other out when someone wanted to put an addition on their house. And so it was a great learning experience besides the fire department stuff. you
Hmm.
know
Getting back to the football thing, what are
yep.
parents misunderstanding for their kids about the present day helmet collar system? What are parents not seeing or misunderstanding when they put their kid onto the field with the equipment that's been
Well,
provided or supplied?
when I started looking into this, again, I just saw the movie. I never heard of CTE, and I was like,
What is
CTE.
CTE? Explain that to our like to my listeners.
So again, all of this is just anyone could do research
Yep.
on this, and I don't want people to say, ah, it's definement. What does he know about this? Well, I just know what I read and I studied. It's easy to look up. And CTE was something that's always been around. But as I said, if you had boxed, when I was younger and I boxed, we used to call it punch drunk. Someone that had been boxing for years and just, was kind of hanging around the gym. So it wasn't until this Dr. Amalu, the pathologist, that put a term to it. And there's been arguments since then. Well, he didn't discover it, someone else. It doesn't matter. He put a name to it. He's the one that brought it out to light.
You're seeing this, you've got some time on your hands, you've got kind of a hunger or burning inside you that says, something got to be done or should be done or could be done. And so you go to the drawing board. Is this a solo project, passion project you're working on, or did
No,
people join you?
it's just me. And I didn't start out trying to do anything like that. The more I read, kind of the angrier I got, frustrated seeing what was being done. And um, I know in 2019, so right before COVID hit, the NFL had something called the Head Health Challenge, where they were giving out grants to, better helmet. And none of these things were the grants that they gave out were all to corporations that already had, stuff out there on the market. And again, it was sensors, newer padding, new type of padding, and I was like, none of that's going to stop this. And not only that, pittance of money, considering how much money this industry generates.
Yeah.
They were giving grants for 100 grand, like 100 grand. I mean, what's that going to do? That this is all you're giving out to stop these injuries, and I just had an idea, and I saw an old Navy Mark V diving suit. We talked about this big brass helmet in a
So tell me,
restaurant,
yeah,
and
tell
I
my audience about that. You're out for dinner one time. And,
yeah, you see them in the magazines sometimes if you look at dive equipment or anything historical
yeah,
with the Navy, and I saw this big mock-up and a big
yeah,
brass helmet. And I
yeah,
looked over, and go, "Oh, that would work," and
yeah,
went home and just kind of like that stuck in my head and rolled around and round, and I was like, "Well, yeah, that would work, but what happens if it wasn't a big brass helmet and was just a football helmet?" I said, "Yeah, but then you couldn't turn your head." So I gave up on it. I just like, and
yeah.
then I was talking to my brother, and I said, "Chris, I have this idea, with these players and getting into football." Says, "You don't play football. You played hockey." I said, "Yeah, I know, but it's still, I get this idea. And how would you do, this?" And, explain to him what I was doing. And he goes, "Oh, you need a ball bearing ring in there." And he's just kind of throwing it out. I said, "What?" And he goes, "You got a Lazy Susan in the kitchen?" Lazy Susan?
Yeah, from
Yeah,
the
the thing
70s.
in the corner cabinet. It's like, yeah, he goes, "Go in there." So he said, "Take that out and flip it over. And see that thing in there, that ring with the little
The
ball
balls of it.
bearings there?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he goes, "That's what you need." I said, "It's a cheap piece of plastic." He goes, "Yeah, there's industrial ball bearing rings
Yeah.
made out of stainless steel and titanium. And, he goes, "That's what you need. You got to put that in there." So I looked at him like, "Well, that's an idea." And I started working with that, came up with that. I said, "All right, before I get ahead of myself, I didn't, I got to look to see if somebody else did this." I did my own patent search, couldn't find anything. So then I went to a patent attorney, and he's an engineer by trade. And he goes, "Brian, you may have something, but we got to do a patent search." So did a patent search, came back with nothing. And he goes, "Look, we'll submit this, but it may take up to 3 years, and the patent
Yeah.
attorney, the patent office may send it back with changes, and I got a full patent under a year." So,
Wow.
and the way we went, and I just kept modifying it, adding things and changing things, and until we have what we have right now.
Well, in simple terms, it's there'll be people driving listening to this that may not have the video, the footage we're showing here on our video, but for those that are driving or listening to the audio, in simple terms, how does your system work?
So when I was doing research, one of the things that the hours and hours of videos and interviews that I read, with doctors and, people in the industry, one of them was a guy that tested equipment for the NFL. He was retired. They were interviewing him about the new helmets, and he could just kind of shook his head and sat back at it. He goes, "I don't know why they keep doing this." He goes, "The helmets from years ago worked just fine. They're not designed to uh, to fix this problem. They were designed for skull fractures to prevent your head from cracking open like an egg." He goes, "As long as the head is independent from the rest of the body, except for that little top of the spine where it's connected, you're going to keep having these injuries." So the interviewer said, "Well, what's going to prevent that?" He goes, "The only thing that's going to prevent it is a system that will stop the head from moving any more than it would in a natural direction, meaning, rotation, top to bottom. But anything like that is going to be too restrictive. It'll never work. And so we're going to keep having these issues." And I'm like, well, that's kind of a defeatist attitude. All the smart people we have in this country, and all the minds, and all the money.
Yeah.
So I took that, and that was kind of the basis of what I was doing. Come up with something, take that original idea, and be able to move the head as much as possible naturally, and only come into equation where it's going past any point where you're going to hurt yourself.
So
And that's what I
is it
came up with.
more than a helmet itself?
It's not a helmet. It's, in
Okay.
fact, I didn't design a new helmet.
Yes.
Any helmet that will work today, it's not an add-on piece. It's a completely new system. So the helmet and shoulder pad manufacturers can make this.
Yes.
The collar that I designed fits in the middle, but their helmets and shoulder pads now have to be remodified to fit this collar. And once that does, it becomes a three-piece system.
You didn't just go out there, build it, get the patent for it. You had some validation behind this. Tell me
Yeah, so
about your testing and even at the NASA
I
level.
had a initially just the collar, then I needed uh to build a whole prototype. But again, the engineer that I had, he basically said, look, all I can do is take a helmet and shoulder pads. There are, that you can buy in a store, and I can just 3D, print pieces to add on, but it's not something you can go with. It's just a demonstration prototype.
Yeah.
So we did that. And again, it's more to show just a visual show of how it works. You can put it on, you can move it around, you can slap it, but you can't, run around the field to it. It's got to go lab testing first. Before that happened, he told me that, look, he goes, the way companies now do this, in the past, they used to have to build dozens of them. So then when you build the actual prototype to be lab tested, you've saved dozens, or hundreds of these things from being built and broken. So the simulation testing. So the engineer had spoken to a company called BioCore, and they do the simulation testing for the NFL for their equipment. So he goes, Brian, I'm just going to give him a call on a whim, and he called them up and they said, well, yeah, we don't work for the NFL. We're an independent test. If you guys are trying to make something that's going to save kids' life, we'll give you the software. It's just, simulation software.
Oh.
So we got that. And then we brought in a consultant. He's a senior engineer at NASA, and he did all the simulation testing. And he saw it and he goes, Brian, he goes, I have 20 patents and 10 pending patents, but this is something that I really think can make a difference. Everything else is usually, well, it could help with this. It's better for this. He goes, this is something that could actually make a difference and save lives. So I'm in. I'm going to help you get this thing off the ground. And he did all the simulation testing, and he said it came back with flying colors. So
And is the product, if it can be made in one size for kids or whatever, can it be manufactured all the way up to
yeah,
uh,
absolutely. It's the
a
same thing as
pet?
helmet and shoulder pads.
Yeah.
So they're already retrofitting now. Everyone's getting tested. So to give an example, two of the major manufacturers, their top helmets, you have to get custom fitted for. So they do this, laser measuring of your head to get an exact size. When I was playing hockey, I remember all the newer skates, you had to get custom fitted for your skates, and it
Yeah.
would form around your foot, and they would bake it in the oven. So they're already doing this. And I had someone early on when I was trying to raise some money, and he said, "Well, I'm just going to cost." I'm like, "I don't know. I don't plan on making this." He goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "Look, I I'm not trying to do this to start a company to make, hundreds of millions of dollars." And he goes, "Besides the fight and the battle with these other companies and the time it would take for me to do, how many more kids are going to get paralyzed and killed?"
Imagine
So,
that. Yeah.
these companies that make it, you guys take it, make it, trying to get and that's the problem. The wall that I hit, if you can call it a wall, is I got no response once I got to this point. There have been companies that have come out with stuff that claim to reduce concussions, and we'll get to that in a minute. But, I was more looking at the guys that were colliding head to head, because once you push down on the helmet and the shoulder pads, you could stop that. He goes, look, what we're learning and what we know about concussions is the more the head moves, the more severe the concussions, the more your head gets snapped back in any different direction. And we've seen them. We've seen these nasty injuries. The more your brain gets slashed around. If you're removing all that movement, if you're only restricting head movement to where it can move naturally, I think this could severely cut down concussions, but we have to get this lab tested and then we have to get it field tested. And honestly, the only really way to know that is once it gets mandated, okay, and every player has to wear it, not a handful and not testing for a year or two. You
Yeah.
take the last 3 to 5 years of the amount of concussions you had, say, in college football. Then you mandate it where everyone's wearing it, not just one team or a couple of players. And then now that everyone's wearing it, what are the concussions like in the following 3 to 5 years? Because you need that average. That's the only true measure of, whether you think. So when I see these companies are claiming stuff about concussions, I'm like, oh, it's debatable. And there's some things out there right now, and I know some doctors are challenging this.
Do you think there would be pushback from players saying it restricts my ability to perform at X amount of level? Um, do you do you do you foresee that with players, or will it will it level the playing field basically because kids will just grow up learning to play with this new equipment on?
Well, that was the other thing that my attorney said. Another reason why to forget the NFL for now.
Yeah,
The older you get, and the longer you play with certain equipment,
sure.
the less happy you are with changes.
Yeah,
Even recently, an unnamed professional quarterback was making a lot of noise because the NFL decided to not allow his favorite helmet to be played in the NFL anymore. It's been, in other words, it was safe for all these years. Now all of a sudden it's unsafe, and
yeah,
he he wasn't very happy with the new one that he had.
yes,
But yeah, I could see some of the pros, like we talked about hockey back when they implemented
yeah,
the helmets for hockey.
yeah.
Well, the guys that were grandfathered in, you could wear it if you wanted, but you didn't have to.
That's right.
And Ron Duguay with his permed hair flowing behind him as he skated
Yeah,
down the ice. No, that's going to ruin my image. So, um,
and
I
how odd would it look now to see someone out there
oh
playing
yeah,
full contact without that
it's
helmet?
great. Well, think about the goalies who used to not have face masks. How scary
Right.
is that?
Yeah,
No, he said, look, just concentrate on the kids. That's who it's going to be easier to accept it anyway, because the parents are more interested in player safety anyway.
I'm thinking of now a good friend of mine, Tim Melm, who was number two in high school in roping in rodeo. It was uh, a freak accident where the rope got snagged up in the leg of the horse, and there was no violent crash. The horse didn't fall on him. It was the quick when the rope caught the underneath him and quickly turned his head. It was the whiplash
Right.
effect of when that rope caught his chin and turned it that caused the brain bleed at the base of his brain. And Tim's got a remarkable story. His podcast just aired, but same thing. It was the quick, violent movement in the neck that caused the brain bleed. That's given him so much issue.
Foam padding and special padding, and if you'd like, we could kind of segue into this whole thing of the Guardian caps that they're wearing now, which is
Yeah, I,
something
I
they've come out with.
I do think we need to because it begs the question. Look, if they're doing it in NASCAR on tracks, right, making them safer, they recognize it. They did it with the hockey,
Right.
bringing in a helmet to protect, concussions, whatever. Where is the rub when you bring this in? Why won't manufacturers engage?
So if you look at, what they have, they've tried a few things over the years, meaning, they know there's a problem.
Yes.
They kind of try to downplay it, especially if you start doing more research. It's a lot more prevalent than you think, but um, So they have approved some things. And the one thing that they're proving, and the NFL is pushing hard on this, is called the Guardian Cap.
I think you sent me a picture of that that we'll display here in the video.
Yeah. So again, I'm not trying to put down anything that anyone wears
Yeah,
that's going to make them feel safer.
yeah,
I'm not trying to put down the guys that make these things and say, but again, it's just more padding.
yes,
It's not, going back to that same interview, again, because think about it, the force has got to go somewhere. So now instead of the padding being on the inside of the helmet, it's on the outside.
yeah,
So I've seen interviews with guys that say it makes them feel like a bobblehead.
yeah,
Um, but more importantly, the independent studies that I've read, not the studies the NFL does that are proprietary, that they don't tell you, how they did them, and they want this to work. They want people to believe it works. But if you listen to Dr. Chris Nowinski, which is head of the Concussion Legacy Foundation, he's he's not very happy with these things, and
yeah,
he says two things that he's got a problem with. The independent studies don't corroborate what they're saying. The makers of the Guardian caps they won't corroborate what the NFL is saying. All they're saying, well, the NFL says it reduces concussion by 50%. They're not saying that they did their own testing. They're just saying that they're going by what the NFL is saying. And
yeah.
no one's really challenging the NFL except for this guy, Chris Nowinski.
Right now, that may be listening to this with season coming up or whatever. Um, what do you want parents to understand right now? I mean, some of them think, helmet protection, shoulder pad, and it's just a sport. Kids are going to get injured. But coming from a C5 quad that's sitting here listening to what you're telling me with the possibility of prevention, um, talk to the parent right now about,
So
how
it's
do you do this?
it's easy to say, well, that happened to so and so in a different state, and yeah,
Yeah,
it's no one thinks it's going to happen to their kid. It's the
correct.
same thing when I work with security, and it's a mindset, always be safe, always watch, be aware of your surroundings. And I tell people now that, when I move to the suburbs, and when you lock your door, it's every night. Well, that doesn't happen around here. I said,
Yeah,
yeah, that argument is, it doesn't happen around here until it does.
yep,
And then when it happens to you, well, oh my God, yeah, because you don't think it's ever going to happen to you the same way you don't think it's going to happen to your kid. So I'm not saying don't sign your kid up for sports. Absolutely not. I've signed my kids up. What I'm trying to do is raise awareness that there's definitely something better. And now that there's AI, and I don't think I told you this, but it's just kind of ironic. And
yeah,
I just want you to listen to what one of the AI programs. They're all saying the same thing.
for
So
sure. Take it.
I put into AI what needs to be invented to stop catastrophic head, neck, and cervical injuries.
Yeah,
And the answer that I got was interesting. Uh, so the answer I got was, the most honest answer is that the most dangerous gap isn't in the helmet; it's in the space between the helmet and the body.
yeah, yeah.
For force transfer and energy routing is the deepest mechanical gap. Every helmet on the market is designed as a standalone device. It absorbs and attenuates rotational and linear head acceleration reasonably well, but when a player takes a crown of helmet impact, compressive force travels straight down to the C3 to C5.
Oh,
The helmet did its job, but the spine still breaks.
see, 3, 4, and 5 keep the diaphragm alive. It's the saying.
Yep.
I
And
remember sitting in a school assembly once in high school, and they were talking about 1 in 45. Let's just give that number. It will be involved in some sort of accident, blah, blah, blah. And here was me sitting, in a group of 400, 500 kids. And I started counting, blah, 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 blah. Got to 45. Like, imagine him, whatever, and I count another 45, all
right.
just in my head. And it passed me. So, I'm counting heads in the assembly, it gets past me. Never in my wildest dreams would I have ever thought someone athlete, boxed like
Right.
you,
Yeah, yeah.
swam, whatever, would be 30 years now sitting in a chair because I broke my neck.
Yep.
Uh, it just it happens.
It
And
happens. And I think people,
yeah,
they want to go about your life and you want to be safe.
yeah,
Absolutely. You want your kids to be safe,
yes,
but they're not as safe as you think. And I
that's
think I
where we
think
need to raise noise.
parents are also part. I was part of the problem. I'll admit it. Is that we just sign off on these waivers and we
Yeah.
don't ask questions and we just send our kids out there, and it's unacceptable when the answer is right there and they just won't. You know, they won't spend the time, energy, or the money into fixing the problem. You know.
What keeps you going doing things like this, uh, where you hit so much resistance?
I don't like being told, I can't do something. I also very stubborn. So if I believe something, and that's all it comes down to. So I believe it, and now I have people involved with me that they believe it, and even my one patent attorney says, you Brian, you're a friend from NASA. He goes, that's a big endorsement. I also have retired football player down here that loves the idea. He wants me to keep going, and he's behind me all the way. Vince Papale, they used to play for the Eagles. They made that movie about a concussion, and so there are people that believe in this. But I need to get more noise made. So basically, these equipment manufacturers will listen and they're willing to sit down with me. And
That was my
that's what I'm
question.
trying to do.
Yeah, that was my question. We've talked to what would you say to the parents? Um, we've nailed it there, but if this makes it to the ears of a decision maker, what is it that they need to do in order to get this thing to the next level? Um,
Well, I
yeah,
mean, to give you an idea, Riddell's new SpeedFlex helmet went from the drawing board to out on the field in 3 months because they have the infrastructure, they have the materials, they have the manufacturing, they have the pipeline of making and getting out into stores and sold. They can do this relatively quickly. So what they need to do is sit down.
mm.
Okay, if you don't like my design, we'll pick somebody else's design. Do something.
Brian, what I've appreciated about you is the fact that, like, reality, well, you have grandkids, or whatever, but there's really no dog in the fight. Uh, you were retired, had a great career, loved safety, but you saw something that was happening and it bothered you, and you didn't just stand by and watch it. Uh, you went about to try and affect change, and that's what I love about you. And so I would say to anyone listening, it wasn't about Brian. It wasn't about money. I'm sure you've spent more than what's ever come into.
Yeah, this,
I
this,
understand that part. So
this has been a headache, believe me.
I think I appreciate you for that reason, and I think for anyone listening, this podcast gets out to 12, 13 countries. Um, there's safety issues that are out there, and I think this product can fix a number of them. Um, check out the website, check out the show notes below. How can people get in touch with you, or what's the best way for them to find information about this product and then either touch base with you, or have you got a website,
Yeah, it's right.
email?
It's right on the website. There's an email in there. There's also like a
And your
texting.
website your
It's it's
website is
it's TriAxis protection system.com.
yep,
So the
uh,
TriAxis is how the device is designed.
yeah,
Um, and yeah, if you go on there, there's information, to send notes, and
perfect.
then
We'll have
I'm
that
s-
all in the show notes.
yeah, I'm still trying to do the rest of social media, which my son has been badgering me about. So
It's a big thing. It's no small thing to pull off a new product and then try to get to market. Look, starting a nonprofit like we have, I mean, there's only so many hours in a day and there's
Right.
only so much
Right.
energy, so
Right.
we
Right.
get it. We want to do our part, and we want to make sure people hear this, and not only hear this, but start, making some noise, put their paddle in the water,
Right.
and they're making some splashes. So there's more than just a ripple. We want a wave effect, and I'll do the best I can
Well,
from
thank you, Stephen.
liability side of it.
I
Yeah,
appreciate the noise and,
and I
anything everyone can do, to move this thing forward and hopefully, we could save some lives.
absolutely. Friends, if this conversation has impacted you, you can do Brian and myself and my wife the biggest honor. Share it. Share
Right.
this story. Share this podcast with someone who's got kids in sports, football. Share it with a coach. Share. The big thing is don't keep it yourself. Brian saw
Right.
a problem and he acted on it. So the action is in your hands. If you've heard this podcast, you can be complacent and leave it, or you can send it on to someone else to listen to. Um, you can do my wife and I the greatest honor by subscribing to our podcast to get information like this. Our whole goal at SwagAbility is to see individuals thrive wherever life finds them, whether it be on the football field or in the sports field, or whether it's a disability. I believe that we all have the ability to thrive in life. Um, until next time, friends, stay resilient, stay focused, and remember, thrive wherever life finds you. Swag out.